Hello, today is Wednesday, June 10th. Welcome to episode 606 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by senior fellows Andy Kaiser and John Lipsey. We have the best of the best today, an elite group for you. We are not talking about Iran, even though, of course, there have been super important developments over the last 48 hours on the Iran question. We could probably talk about it every single day if we were so inclined, but we're going to take a short break from the Iran narrative and talk about North Korea. North Korea, of course, is one of the 4 countries in the alliance of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea against Western interests around the world. It is a nuclear power. It is run by a dictator named Kim Jong Un, who is the grandson of the founder Kim Il-sung of North Korea from generations ago. It has been a problem for the U.S. for a very long time. The reason we're talking about it today, there have been some recent developments. Xi Jinping, the premier of China, was in Pyongyang a few days ago. It was his only trip outside of China during this year, 2026. So that's a notable thing. North Korea also has had a couple of stories written about it in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, talking about economic success in Pyongyang. Evidently, you can go to restaurants there and get pretty good chicken wings. There are Chinese EVs, that makes me a little bit jealous, I must confess, that will drive you around as taxi cabs in Pyongyang. And Pyongyang is adding more housing units than either Chicago or Los Angeles, which as John will tell you later, may say something more about American political leadership in those cities than in Pyongyang. Nevertheless, it is a notable thing. Also, news that North Korea's nuclear stockpile is growing rapidly. It has 9,000 centrifuges at its nuclear facility in Yongbyon. That's a lot of centrifuges, folks. It enables it to produce a lot of enriched uranium, which make more material for nuclear warheads. Some people say that North Korea is on its way to having a nuclear arsenal the size of France or Great Britain's, which would be an amazing thing. Probably a little bit of an overinterpretation there, but nevertheless not implausible. So North Korea has defied U.S. economic sanctions. It has a robust nuclear weapons program. It may have a growing economy in ways that no one was expecting. President Trump has made an offer to talk to Kim Jong Un. It has not been positively received by Kim Jong Un. Andy, level set for us here. Are things changing with North Korea's position on the global chessboard here?
Yeah, I do think there's a few interesting developments here. Les, you mentioned one, which was sort of this, essentially being a nuclear power and the stability that can provide a regime, even a rogue one like North Korea. You also have the stability of the West, and particularly the United States, kind of leaving North Korea alone for now a number of years post, of course, President Trump in the first term, where he famously liked to tweet about fire and fury and, some pretty incendiary language in those days. You don't hear much about that. Now, the president's busy. We mentioned Iran, also prosecuting, wars in Venezuela, trying to land the Russia-Ukraine plane, dealing with China, plenty on the president's plate. So you don't hear a lot on North Korea, which provides Kim Jong Un some space, right? The economic development we're seeing is, according to the articles you referenced, Les, is more about the state sort of asserting control, kind of cracking down on North Korea's famous black market, sort of underground markets. Now, they have their own unique North Korean style of doing this, which includes public executions for those who don't comply. So, shoot a couple people in the head in Pyongyang and folks sort of get with the program. So I'm not sure it's something to be emulated, but it's certainly an interesting development. I am a little skeptical of anything I hear out of North Korea. Famously, this is a place where we heard Kim Jong Un the first time he played a round of golf, for example, Les. He shot a 38 under par and 11 holes in one.
Pretty good.
The only thing that's surprising about that is that it wasn't 18 holes in one.
Yeah, well, you've got room for improvement.
You know, with North Korea, it's very hard to get information out. We do not have a diplomatic presence. We do not have an intelligence presence in North Korea. So I'm always a little skeptical of anything I hear out of North Korea.
John, I don't want to name names, and I don't want to get too political here, but one of the political parties in our country is effectively, in my view, taking the side of Iran and Hamas in the Middle East. Is that same party going to start praising Kim Jong Un and his policies? It doesn't seem totally improbable to me.
I hadn't considered that, Les. I think the public executions might be an inhibitor on that to some degree. It might have some appeal. Okay, Andy. Yes, it's always rational to be skeptical of what we're hearing out of North Korea, including in puff pieces in large U.S. publications. However, I do think there's some data backing up some uptick in economic activity. The lights are brighter at night than they used to be. We're seeing more, vessel traffic. They're building up stockpiles for oil and other energy resources and like. I think, and we're seeing on the ground real stuff happening in North Korea's relationship with Russia and China that has dramatically increased trade both in weapons, munitions, military forces, but also, with Russia, but then also, it seems, consumer tech and energy and other goods and services with China. And that seems to be the basis of the meeting that she had in Pyongyang. Seems to be around loosening up trade and increasing economic exchange. It's also notable that she has stopped talking about denuclearization, seems to have left that off the table while seeking to increase trade, possibly just sort of in full flaunting of UN sanctions that remain in place. Both China and Russia have called for the relaxing and lifting of UN sanctions, and it seems China may just be going forward. So I do think that North Korea is in a bit of a catbird seat right now. The economy is humming. They're playing two big superpowers off each other to gain on the military front and the economic front. This puts the U.S. in not a great position to have a lot of influence to re-engage the North Korea question, Les. Both because of the advancements North Korea's made, dramatic, significant advancements to entrench their nuclear program, but also just the lack of effectiveness and impact of U.S. and UN sanctions regimes at this stage. So I do think it calls for a bit of, I don't think it's appropriate for the U.S. to drop the goal of denuclearization, but we may need to aim a little lower to try to achieve some other more limited goals in the meantime. One of those that we should be focused on is North Korea's missile capability and their ability to hit the United States and their ability to currently overwhelm our missile defense capabilities in the Northwest. And so that might be the type of thing that negotiations with North Korea should be focused on, limiting further nuclear weapons development, limiting proliferation, limiting further development of their ICBM capability and capacity. The other thing that I would just mention is that when President Trump went to Beijing to visit with Xi, it was reported that Xi sort of flew off the handle over Japan and its military buildup, and President Trump reportedly responded to say that they're facing North Korea's nuclear advancements, and so that's the pointing to that as the genesis for their military buildup. I think there was a lot of concern and criticism around President's remarks there. However, I think that was actually an interesting way of sort of diffusing China's critique and making it about North Korea rather than China, and putting it on China's plate to deal with that issue with its partner North Korea, rather than making it about the bilateral relationship there. But the other something that the U.S. did in this case was some counter programming while she was in Pyongyang. The Japan hosted the U.S. for an extended defense dialogue. So we had the State Department, Department of War, U.S. Strategic Command, all there, and for some counter programming during that visit. And they put out a joint statement and reaffirmed the commitment to denuclearization, but also the commitment to the defense of Japan, including with the use of nuclear weapons. So reaffirming the U.S. nuclear umbrella for Japan while President Xi was in Pyongyang was, I think, important and important to do, and important signal to send.
Andy, great stuff, John. Andy, you're an astute observer of the region. It seems to me the unlimited friendship between Moscow and Beijing may be at risk over North Korea. In other words, the interests of Russia and the interests of China are not the same when it comes to the resurgent regime in Pyongyang. Is there some creative way, and you would have to give the current Trump administration a lot of credit, at least for being creative, a creative way for them to use this to advance U.S. interests more globally as a way to drive a wedge between these two nefarious regimes in Moscow and Beijing?
Yeah, it's a great point and reminds us of sort of the situation during the Cold War, where we were able to exploit some of those differences. So I would be all for that, Les. The enemy of my enemy can indeed be my friend. Let's see if that plays out the same way here in East Asia.
All right, folks, we're running out of time. There's a lot to talk about here. We might want to do North Korea Part 2 on Friday for fun. One of my favorite foreign policy history facts is that in the last 2,000 years, Japan has invaded Korea 900 times. So if we think that the current tensions in the region are about us, or are about China, or about Russia, oftentimes they are not. It is about historical grievances and historical patterns of behavior that we should be aware of as we're thinking about these implications for U.S. national security. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks to Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, June 12th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. We're on YouTube. Check out our channel there for a video of today's episode. We look fantastic today. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.